Arguments often break down when one person demands justification. What's the argument for belief X for every justification? What's the argument for belief Z? Creating an infinite regress that never reaches stable ground. In these situations, the conversation stops being about the issue itself and becomes trapped in a procedural loop. A more productive move is to shift from supplying yet another argument to asking for the underlying motivation. Motivation tracking interrupts the regress because it forces the interlocutor to reveal what they actually care about, what principle they're protecting, or what risk they're trying to avoid. Instead of climbing an endless ladder of why, the exchange returns to the foundational commitments that give the argument its shape. When someone asks for the motivation behind an initial argument, they are not derailing the discussion, they are engaging with it at the level where genuine understanding becomes possible. An argument is not meant to be a barrier or a rigid structure that blocks conversation. It is a frame, a way of specifying the issue so that people don't talk past one another or rely on hidden assumptions that distort the exchange. Arguments narrow the scope, clarify commitments, and create a shared reference point. They function as conduits for communication, not obstacles to it. Asking for motivation is a way of stepping inside that frame and understanding why it was chosen in the first place. This is why motivation matters so deeply. The motivation behind an argument reveals the lens through which the speaker is viewing the situation. Without that lens, the argument can be misread, misapplied, or attacked in a form the speaker never intended. When someone asks, "What motivated you to frame it this way?" they are participating in the handshake that begins the conversation, the moment where both parties align their interpretive norms, values, and concerns so the dialectic can proceed without distortion. Once motivation is on the table, the argument becomes intelligible in a deeper way, allowing both sides to evaluate it fairly, strengthen it, or challenge it without misrepresentation. However, not all breakdowns in argumentation take the form of infinite regress. Some people bypass the entire argument by launching an epistemic attack at the very start, asking, "Why are you justified in believing this is true?" This move is not a request for clarification, but a refusal to enter the shared frame at all. Instead of engaging with the argument, the motivation, or the structure, they challenge the legitimacy of the starting point itself. Unlike regress, which occurs within a developing dialectic, this epistemic sidestep collapses the conversation before it begins. It shifts the burden of proof unfairly and prevents the handshake that makes interpretation possible. Taken together, these dynamics reveal a deeper principle. Arguments are not self-contained objects, but relational tools, whose meaning depends on the motivations that produce them and the willingness of both parties to inhabit a shared frame. Infinite regress arises when the frame is entered, but never allowed to stabilize. Epistemic sidesteps arise when the frame is rejected outright. Healthy dialectic requires avoiding both extremes. It begins with a frame, continues through motivation, and unfolds into interpretation, a cooperative process where understanding is built rather than blocked. Interpersonal example, the curfew argument. Regress version. Parent, you need to be home by 10. Teen, why? Parent, because it's late. Teen, why does that matter? Parent, because I want you safe. Teen, why is that a reason? Parent, because safety is important. Teen, why is that important? The conversation collapses into a procedural loop. No shared frame ever stabilizes. Motivation tracking move. Parent, you need to be home by 10. Teen, what's motivating that rule? Parent, I worry about drunk drivers after 10. It's not about control, it's about risk. Now the frame is visible. The argument becomes intelligible. The teen can respond to the actual concern. Epistemic sidestep. Parent, you need to be home by 10. Teen, why are you justified in believing that curfews are legitimate at all? This doesn't engage the rule, the risk, or the motivation. It attacks the entire category of parental authority. The conversation never begins. 2. Philosophical example, moral realism versus anti-realism. Regress version. Realist, moral facts exist. Anti-realist, what justifies that belief? Realist, intuition. Anti-realist, what justifies trusting intuition? Realist, evolutionary design. Anti-realist, what justifies trusting evolution? And so on. The regress is infinite, because each justification demands another justification. Motivation tracking move. Anti-realist, before we go further, what's motivating your commitment to realism? Realist, I'm trying to preserve the idea that some harms are objectively wrong even if a society endorses them. Now the debate has a shared frame. The realist is protecting the normative authority of moral condemnation. The anti-realist can respond to that, not to an endless chain of epistemic demands. Epistemic sidestep. Anti-realist, before we discuss realism, justify why you think any belief can be justified at all. This is not engagement, it's a refusal to enter the frame. The conversation dies before it starts. 3. Policy, example, universal basic income. Regress version. Advocate, UBI reduces poverty. Critic, what's your evidence? Advocate, pilot studies. Critic, what justifies trusting pilot studies? Advocate, they're empirical. Critic, what justifies trusting empiricism? The critic is not engaging the policy, they're climbing the ladder of justification. Motivation tracking move. Critic, what's motivating your support for UBI? Advocate, I'm trying to reduce administrative burdens and eliminate welfare cliffs. Now the critic can engage the actual concern, bureaucratic inefficiency, and perverse incentives. Epistemic sidestep. Critic, before we talk about UBI, justify why you think governments can ever know anything about economic outcomes. This is not critique, it's an attempt to dissolve the frame entirely. 4. Scientific example. Climate change. Regress version. Scientist, CO2 emissions cause warming. Skeptic, what's the evidence? Scientist, radiative forcing models. Skeptic, What justifies trusting models? Scientist, they're validated. Skeptic, what justifies trusting validation? Again, regress. Motivation tracking move. Skeptic, what's motivating your confidence in this framework? Scientist, I'm tracking the convergence of independent lines of evidence, models, paleoclimate data, and direct measurements. Now the skeptic can engage the structure of the evidence rather than demanding infinite justification. Epistemic sidestep. Skeptic, before we talk about climate, justify why you think empirical observation is a reliable method at all. This is not a climate debate, it's an attack on the possibility of science. 5. Everyday example. You should apologize. Regress version. Friend A, you should apologize to Sam. Friend B, why? A, you hurt their feelings. B, why is that a reason? A, because relationships matter. B, why do they matter? The conversation spirals. Motivation tracking move. B, what's motivating you to push for an apology? A, I'm trying to prevent the group from fracturing. I'm not taking sides, I'm trying to keep the peace. Now the argument is intelligible. The concern is group cohesion, not moral blame. Epistemic sidestep. B, before we talk about apologizing, justify why you think interpersonal norms have any authority over me. This is not engagement, it's a refusal to enter the normative frame. Flat Earth example. How the three dynamics play out. Scientist, the Earth is round. Satellite imagery confirms it. Flat Earther, what justifies trusting satellite images? Scientist, independent space agencies corroborate them. Flat Earther, what justifies trusting space agencies? Scientist, their data is cross-validated with physics. Flat Earther, what justifies trusting physics? Scientist, it's empirically verified. Flat Earther, what justifies trusting empirical verification? The Flat Earther accepts the topic Earth's shape, but refuses to let any justification settle. The conversation becomes an infinite ladder of why, never reaching stable ground. Key feature, they're inside the frame but refusing to let the frame stabilize. 2. Motivation tracking, the move that actually makes progress. Scientist, the Earth is round. Flat Earther, what's motivating you to frame it that way? Scientist, I'm trying to track the simplest model that explains navigation, satellite orbits, seasons, and gravity without adding unnecessary assumptions. Now the Flat Earther sees the lens. The scientist is motivated by parsimony, predictive accuracy, and model coherence. If the Flat Earther responds honestly, Flat Earther, I'm motivated by distrust of institutions. I think large organizations hide information. Now both motivations are visible. Scientist, coherence, and predictive power. Flat Earther, institutional distrust. This doesn't magically resolve the disagreement, but it anchors the conversation in the real commitments driving each side. You can now debate trust, epistemic risk, institutional incentives, etc., instead of endlessly debating curvature. Key feature. Motivation tracking reveals the actual commitments shaping the argument. 3. Epistemic sidestep. Refusing the frame entirely. Scientist, the Earth is round. Flat Earther, before we talk about that, justify why you think any belief can be justified at all. This is not skepticism, it's a refusal to enter the conversation. Or another common sidestep. Flat Earther, you can't know anything unless you've personally verified it with your own senses. This isn't a critique of the argument, it's an attempt to invalidate the entire category of indirect evidence, which is the foundation of modern science. The conversation collapses before it begins, because the Flat Earther is not challenging the claim, they're challenging the possibility of shared epistemic norms. Key feature. The frame is rejected, not interrogated. What these examples show. 1. Infinite regress. Happens inside the frame. The interlocutor accepts the topic, but refuses to let any justification settle. 2. Motivation tracking. Reveals the reason the frame exists. It's the handshake that aligns values, risks, and interpretive norms. 3. Epistemic sidestep. Rejects the frame entirely. It's not critique, it's an attempt to dissolve the conversation before it begins.